Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Dr. Destroy's woke ban on psychologists using common words like obese and poor. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Dr. Sarah Hill is speaking out against a new ridiculous agenda coming from the American Psychological Association's absurdly woke new dictionary bans. They don't want you utilizing certain normal words or certain normal phrases because it doesn't push their agenda. And I know that sounds strange, but it's true. One of the people featured in this article is this doctor, Dr. Maisa Akbar. Here she is on Twitter promoting an agenda. Don't miss this free workshop on racial literacy for children. Literally calling this racial literacy, as if you're illiterate as a child if you don't look at things the way that Maya Akbar does. March 8th, 1 p.m., and it won't be lost on you that, yes, this has been integrated into Sesame Street extremely aggressively. Sesame Street and APA integrating racial justice into your work with children. Who is the APA? The APA is the American Psychological Association. Just looking a little bit further onto the first post of Dr. Maya Akbar's Facebook page, she helpfully quotes Michelle Obama to tell us where she's coming from. Quote, "If you want to change the game, you can't always do it from the outside. You need to do it from the inside." Michelle Obama at hashtag Wall Street Journal Future. So if you want to change the game, you can't do it from the outside. You need to get in on the inside and disrupt, corrupt, and covertly change standards. If you click on this link, you get what she's doing at the APA, the American Psychological Association. APA's commitment to addressing systemic racism. A year after APA's apology to people of color, the association is working on an organization-wide process to follow through on more than 50 actions designed to dismantle systemic racism. Systemic racism, which actually doesn't exist. It's about a racist takeover of the government. Fortunately, we have some people like Dr. Sarah Hill who are out there speaking out against this. She was also on recently with Dr. Jordan Peterson in another really interesting different discussion. Coming from the Daily Mail, American Psychological Association's absurdly woke new dictionary bans common phrases like "you're killing it," "turn a blind eye," or "blue-collar job" because they're microaggressions or offensive. "You're nailing it" is a microaggression that could be interpreted as violent. The terms "take a shot," "stand up for," and "birth sex" are also in the firing line. Psychologists should avoid using phrases such as "you're nailing it" when trying to encourage patients because it could be interpreted as violent. By who, I have no idea. It's completely insane. It's just about trying to remake the Western mind. That is according to a new psychological language manual that lists dozens of everyday phrases that should be swapped out for more inclusive terms. Phrases such as "take a shot at," "target population," and "you're killing it" should be avoided because they are microaggressions, the guide says. Meanwhile, "stand up for," "turn a blind eye to," and "lend your voice to a cause" should be axed because they're ableist and offensive to disabled people. The manual released in December by the American Psychological Association, the APA, which has nearly 160,000 professional members, including scientists, clinicians, and consultants. What they're trying to do is destroy language so they can destroy ideas. It's like not allowing people to learn to read. It destroys people's ideas and it destroys their ability to stand up for themselves and to be individuals. The guidelines aim to dismantle the destructive hierarchies that have marginalized people from equitable representation and participation in society, the organization claims. But Dr. Sarah Hill, a professor of psychology with expertise in women, health, and sexual psychology at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, told DailyMail.com that restricting language would only make communication between patient and doctor harder. Quote, "It just creates a situation where people don't want to talk," she said. "All it does is make well-intentioned people afraid to speak because they're afraid of hurting people's feelings." Dr. Hill had received an email about the new language guide, having previously been a member when she was a participating clinician. The guide not only includes violent language, but also identity-related terms, gender terms, and socioeconomic terms. For example, poor and blue-collar workers. Sold down the river, which means to betray someone or to do something which harms them in order to gain an advantage for yourself, is also recommended against. It is now said to be racist. The APA said, This expression belittles the painful history of millions of enslaved people sold and literally transported via the Mississippi or Ohio rivers to perform brutal manual labor on cotton plantations further south during the 19th century. Betrayed should be used instead, according to the APA. Psychologists should also refrain from saying the word obese and opt for higher weight instead. This switch should be made to avoid perpetrating weight stigma. Use neutral terms that affirm and respect the dignity of all individuals regardless of their body size, the APA said. Dr. Hill does not agree. Obese is a clinical term. To try to obfuscate that is not smart. It's inaccurate. It's essentially taking what's a precise term and then trying to make it less precise, she said. I don't know why that would ever be a good idea. Precision in language is always important. It's with precision in language that you can convey ideas. That's what they don't like. These are some very dangerous people in charge of making, quote, change at the APA. They're affecting 160,000 members and everyone else who interacts with them. Psychologists are not even allowed to use compliments and should also ask consent from patients before commenting on their appearance. Compliments like, wow, you're looking great, should be avoided. And psychologists should instead ask, is it all right if we talk about your weight? This prevents unintended consequences or mixed messages about people's health or appearance, they say. But Dr. Hill says they're common phrases. Nobody gets upset about them. And if people do get upset about them, I think everybody just needs to learn to relax. It just creates a situation where people don't want to talk, she added. It becomes harder and harder for me to teach my classes every single year because of things like this. I'm not someone who tries to make people feel bad or to discriminate. I certainly don't feel or harbor any ill feelings for people who have a different sexual orientation or race or ethnicity or ability level than I do. Killing it or nailing it are deemed unacceptable because they're violent, the APA claimed, and it should be replaced by the term great job or awesome. Psychologists should also refrain from saying take a shot at, take your best shot, or take a stab at. Give it a go or try are safer alternatives, they say. Although these terms and idioms may seem innocuous, ways to signal achievement, it is notable how pervasive violent or militaristic language is seen as positive when it should be the opposite. It's not militaristic or violent language, it's assertive language. And people who have mental issues should learn to be assertive, take responsibility, take accountability, and focus on taking action to improve their lives. You want to train people to be assertive, not to try to make them weak or accept them like they are in a troubled state. What's awful about the language guide is that it doesn't always solve the problem, because people who are actually jerks, this isn't going to change their behavior, Dr. Hill said. Creating a list like this is just going to make it harder for people who are well-meaning. The APA's own Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Maisa Akbar, that's this lady, who's also involved in poisoning Sesame Street, who even penned the foreword to the new language guide, used some of the violent phrases herself in 2019 on Twitter, DailyMail.com found. Her friend killed it at the Hispanic Federation Gala, she tweeted. Quote, I think that goes to show just how harmless and mindless saying these things is, said Dr. Hill. People say these things and they're not saying it with an ill spirit. It's hard to avoid saying these things. These are just like part of common language. The more rules that we get about what's offensive and what's not offensive, all that it does is quiet people with good hearts because then nobody wants to say anything. The APA is a scientific and professional organization that represents psychologists in the U.S. with 160,000 members. It serves as a source of guidance for clinicians who are practicing with patients. The association criticized the phrases stand up for and lend your voice and fall on deaf ears for being ableist. Support or champion, support and be willfully ignorant or deliberately ignore are suggested as replacement terms. Quote, I don't think people are actually going to be offended by these phrases, Dr. Hill said. I think that it would take somebody who's just looking for something to be upset about to be offended by them, honestly. I know people who are in wheelchairs, and I have relatives who are on the autism spectrum, and all these other things. Most people, even if they say they're a marginalized group, generally don't feel bad when hearing phrases like these, she added. It's other people who are usually in positions of privilege and power that go on and start telling people how offended they should be by this language. It's really not a good thing. Even Dr. Akbar herself said in 2018 in a tweet, have the courage to stand up for what you believe in and the wisdom to know when to stand down, phrases she's not supposed to be using. Quote, turn a blind eye to should be also swapped with ignore or refuse to notice, the APA said, to be more inclusive to the people who are blind. Psychologists should say, show unconscious bias instead of the ableist phrase, have a blind spot for. The phrase, everyone should have a voice in this matter, should also be abstained from and substituted with everyone should have input. The term be short-sighted should also be exchanged for ignore or miss due to its discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. Ableist terms and phrases are pervasive in everyday language, the association claims. Although the use of these ableist terms may be unintentional, be thoughtful about how to avoid language that denigrates disabilities. Birth sex should also be steered clear of, and assigned sex should be used instead to avoid making assumptions about someone's sex. With birth sex, biological sex is biological sex, Dr. Hill said. It's not what's assigned. It has to do with the size of your sex cells. If you've got big ones, you're a female. If you've got little ones, you're a male. You can also have gender. The two are not mutually exclusive, and they're not always the same. I think that we can recognize that and still be accurate with our language and calling biological sex biological sex. The term blue-collar worker should also be avoided, the APA said, and should be swapped for skilled trades worker or manual laborer. This term is considered somewhat outdated as they originated in the early 20th century, the APA said. So any words that are more than 100 years old, let's just get rid of them. That's what they're trying to say. Use our new words so we can push our new society on you. Because as Dr. Mesa Akbar likes to say, if you want to change the game, you can't always do it from the outside, you need to do it from the inside. And she can't stop thinking about what Michelle Obama said, and that's why the APA is working so hard to embrace it. A blue-collar job relates to someone who performs physically demanding manual work such as agriculture, manufacturing, or construction. Poor is another word deemed unacceptable by the Psychologists organization. People whose incomes are below the federal poverty threshold is their recommended phrasing. The APA said many people find the term low class and poor pejorative. Conversely, class solidarity exists in poor people's movements, and many individuals proudly identify as working class. Define specific income brackets and levels if possible. For example, low income. As always, there should be room for nuance and flexibility when using these terms. Dr. Hill says, we should trust that most people aren't terrible and give people a little bit of grace with their language. This language policing is really hard. Can you imagine you're supposed to be policing not just the psychologists, but you're supposed to police your patients and not allow them to speak the way they need to speak to convey their own feelings and their ideas so that you could actually help these people to improve their lives, create a better situation for them and their family members? No, it's not enough because Michelle Obama wants you to change things from the inside. And Dr. Mesa Akbar wants you to do the same. Dr. Hill says, I can't tell you how many people in academia are absolutely exhausted because of how much we have to monitor what we say in the classroom. In recent years, academics have increasingly come under fire for using language that has been deemed inappropriate or discriminatory. Quote, it's not like we were going around on these terrible rants, she said. We're all well-meaning, very liberal-minded people. Dr. Hill continues, now it's not even fun to teach because you have to monitor every little thing you say because you've been told that everything you say could possibly be offensive. According to the APA, target population should also be switched with specific population or group or focus. The term target population may be offensive because many communities are targeted for violence, the association said. Also, Target is a retail store that a lot of people don't want to shop at anymore, so that could be offensive, I guess, too. This is so ridiculous. Using the phrase suffering with disability or condition should be replaced by a person with a disability or person with a diagnosis of due to its negative connotations, said the APA. Dr. Hill said she would not be implementing the recommendations in her work. Quote, I always try to be very careful with my language, to say things in a way that is precise and not unkind. Quote, I'm not an unkind person, and I wouldn't say anything that was intentionally hurtful to somebody. But I can't look at that list of things and try to embody it, or else I'm never going to be able to open my mouth again. We can't keep doing this. And that's not all from the American Psychological Association from Breitbart.com. American Psychological Association policy promotes K through 12 transgenderism. K through 12 is actually kindergarten through 12th grade. Kindergarten? They're a little too young for this at kindergarten. The American Psychological Association, the APA, has adopted a policy statement that promotes K through 12 transgenderism and denounces child protection laws. The new policy calls for insurance plans to extend coverage for healthcare services tailored to the developmental needs of children, adolescents, and adults identifying as transgender, gender diverse, or non-binary, encompassing both psychological and medical gender-affirming care, the APA said in a press release. And here's their press release. APA adopts groundbreaking policy supporting transgender, gender diverse, and non-binary individuals. I mean, you could be supportive of people, but it's too young to take this into kindergarten. I don't mean to insult anyone or hurt their feelings, but stop it with the kindergarten stuff. The organization claims the policy affirms evidence-based care for transgender, gender-diverse, and non-binary children, adolescents, and adults, claiming also that restricting such practices puts people at risk of depression, anxiety, and other negative mental health outcomes. You know, when I was in kindergarten, I was offered the opportunity to skip a grade and go into first grade, but I didn't want to leave my friends. I always remember this from kindergarten. My brother was skipped a grade. Is this a negative thing? Not really. But I've never really been 100% comfortable about the decision that I made when I was in kindergarten. I remember I was playing bingo with some friends. There was a friend of mine named Joe, and there were these little red circular pieces that you put on the bingo card. And I remember being asked that question by one of my parents. I think it was my mom. It was apparently something very memorable for me. I don't think these are questions to be asking kindergartners. I'm a pretty sharp guy, but I wasn't really as worldly as I am now. I have a lot more experience than I had when I was in kindergarten to make life-affecting decisions. Probably it was okay for me to not skip the grade. But at the same time, I don't think I should have even been asked. If I had the skill set, great. If I didn't have the skill set, it's also understandable. Parents should be making all the decisions about their children and their children's future at that young of an age. Kindergarten is not the age to be asking these kinds of questions. Quote, the adoption of this resolution affirms APA's dedication to promoting inclusivity, dignity, and access to quality healthcare for all individuals, regardless of their gender identity or expression, APA President Cynthia de la Fuente said. She added, it sends a clear message that state bans on gender-affirming care disregard the comprehensive body of modern and psychological research supporting the positive impact of such treatments in alleviating psychological distress and improving overall well-being for transgender, gender-diverse, and non-binary individuals throughout their lives. The policy title, Policy Statement on Affirming Evidence-Based Inclusive Care for Transgender, Gender-Diverse, and Non-Binary Individuals Addressing Misinformation and the Role of Psychological Practice in Science, was approved by APA's Governing Council of Representatives last week. All of these institutions are captured, so unfortunately, we don't have an honest medical system anymore. Not the APA, not the AMA. We're going to have to capture back all these institutions and set them back to functioning properly. At least we have a group called Do No Harm. That's a doctors group that's been helping with a lot of these medical issues and a lot of DEI discrimination in medical schools. Don't let any of this demoralize you. Don't be depressed. We are going to win. We're just under attack right now. We have people like Michelle Obama inspiring people to change society from the inside, and they're capturing institutions. What they're doing is not right, and they will be stopped. In 2019, the APA published a guide instructing graduate programs in psychology to end language that refers to biological differences among individuals, seeking to replace it with gender-inclusive terminology in order to provide a safe learning environment for transgender students. Of course, there's nothing wrong with the word inclusive. It's the definition that they've changed of the word inclusive that has now developed into a problem. The people pushing this agenda want inclusive to really be exclusive. They want to get rid of the old ways and just put in these new ways. They're completely untested. Of course, there's no science to back this up. It's incredibly dangerous. No, we shouldn't be asking kindergartners if they want to skip a grade, and we certainly shouldn't ask them if they want to live life as a different gender. It's too young. It's inappropriate. Fortunately, there are doctors like Dr. Sarah Hill who will speak out against this nonsense and support the healthy practice of psychology, not the agenda-driven practice of psychology. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.